They left him to die in a hole in the earth. And somehow, under that scorching Arizona sun, he was still alive. I wasn't supposed to be there. That part of the desert west of Tucson was off my patrol route, but I'd chased a plastic grocery bag blowing across the sand. Stupid, I know. And when I stopped to grab it, I heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. A soft, stuttering whimper, too dry to be a bark, too broken to ignore. I followed it, scanning the cracked earth. The desert was silent. No birds, no insects, just the whimper. Then I saw the crater. Natural sinkholes weren't uncommon after the last monsoon season, but this one looked different, like the ground had opened up just enough to swallow something. I stepped closer and saw him, a German Shepherd puppy, no more than 4 or 5 months old, lying at the bottom of the pit, legs sprawled awkwardly, ribs showing, his fur the same color as the dust that buried him. One ear was flopped down against his head, and right beside him, half buried in the dirt, was a bright red plastic dog bowl turned upside down, as if someone had left it behind on purpose. He didn't move when I called, didn't bark, didn't even lift his head, but he blinked just once, and that blink hit harder than any scream. I'm Alex. I've been with Wildlife Rescue in Puma County for 8 years. I've seen coyotes hit by trucks, owls caught in barbed wire, half-wild horses with bullet wounds. But I've never, not once, seen something that looked so close to death and yet still alive. I dropped to my knees at the edge of the pit. The sides were loose sand, steep, at least 12 feet down. If I slid in, I might not get out without gear. I reached for my radio, but out there, signal was a joke. So I did the only thing I could. I whispered, "Hang on, buddy," and turned back to my truck for rope. Behind me, the wind picked up, and when I looked back, the puppy was still staring at me, like he was trying to remember what hope looked like. The rope burned my palms as I tied it to the frame of my truck and looped the other end around my waist. I didn't have harnesses or pulleys, no backup, just a single nylon line and a prayer. The desert around me was buzzing with heat, the kind that made the horizon wobble like a lie. But all I could see was that German Shepherd puppy motionless at the bottom of the sinkhole next to that overturned red bowl like a forgotten offering. I tested the weight. The ground near the edge was fragile, crusted over, but hollow underneath. I threw one foot over, then the other, and slowly began lowering myself in. Sand gave way beneath my boots. The wall cracked and trickled dust down onto the puppy's back. He didn't flinch. Halfway down, the rope jolted. For a moment, I thought the truck might slide or the anchor knot might give. I froze, heart thundering, sweat burning my eyes. I looked down. He was still watching me, not blinking this time, just waiting. My boots hit the bottom with a soft crunch. I crouched beside him. He looked worse up close, eyes sunken, gums pale, tongue cracked and dry as leather. There were tiny grains of sand clinging to the corners of his mouth. I touched his side gently. Warm, too warm. His chest rose barely. He wasn't making a sound anymore. I reached for my canteen, unscrewed the cap, poured a few drops into my palm, and let them slide onto his tongue. He twitched. Not much. Just a spasm in one paw, but it was enough. I gave him more slowly. He tried to swallow, then coughed weakly. The sound was thin, like a whisper, trying to find its voice. "You're still in there," I said. "You're not done yet." That bowl, it haunted me. Someone had fed him once, gave him water, and then what? Decided he was too much trouble. Drove him out here and dropped him in like trash. My hands shook as I lifted him. He weighed almost nothing. His fur came away in tufts where it was matted. I wrapped him in the flannel overshirt I kept behind my seat and tightened the rope around us both. I looked up toward the sky. The climb back would be harder, riskier, but I had no choice. Above me, the clouds were starting to gather. In Arizona, that could mean one thing, a storm. And if it came early, this hole could become a grave. I pulled the rope tight and whispered again, "We're getting out of here, Ozzy. I promise." The climb was a war. Every step up the shifting wall of that sinkhole felt like it could be the one that sent us both tumbling back down. The sand crumbled beneath my boots, dragging little avalanches with it. My fingers dug into the rope like claws. AZ didn't move. His weight in my arms felt like ash. Light, fragile, impossible. I pressed his body close to my chest, shielding him from the falling grit. His ear twitched against my ribs. That tiny movement was the only thing keeping the panic from taking over. He was still in there, still fighting. 3 feet up, my foot slipped. We slid half a meter down before I caught myself slamming my shoulder into the wall and scraping it raw. My legs shook. The rope strained. I looked up. The truck was still holding, barely. I took a breath that felt like it might crack my ribs and kept going. At the halfway point, my hand cramped. I almost lost my grip, but then I felt it. The softest movement against my chest. Uzi's nose pressed weakly into my shirt. Not random, not instinct. He was holding on too. By the time I reached the edge, my shirt was soaked through with sweat. My arms were dead. My mouth tasted like metal. I didn't climb the last few feet. I collapsed upward. We tumbled onto the desert floor together in a cloud of dust. I couldn't move for a second, just lay there flat on my back, the sun stabbing my eyes. Ozzy curled against me, wrapped in the flannel. My chest heaved. His barely rose at all. I rolled onto my side and checked his breathing. Still shallow, but still there. I grabbed the canteen and let a few more drops touch his tongue. He swallowed, eyes fluttered. Then he gave the softest, strangest sigh I've ever heard, like his tiny lungs were trying to thank me. We weren't safe. Not yet. I had no signal out there. The clinic was over an hour away. The clouds above us were thickening, bruising into a storm front. The wind kicked dust across the plain. I laid him gently on the passenger seat, tucked the shirt tight around him, and whispered, "Don't quit now. I didn't pull you out just to lose you on the road." Then I floored it. Tires spun in sand, and behind us, the hole that almost became his grave disappeared in the dust. The engine roared as I tore down the dirt road, windshield stray with dust and streaks of sunburnt sky. Every bump rattled the truck and jostled the tiny bundle beside me. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other on Ossie's chest, feeling for breath. Still there, but shallow, unsteady, like a flame that could vanish with a gust. The desert around us blurred into motion, cacti bending in the wind, dry grass flattening as the first hints of the storm pushed through. I'd seen monsoon cells like this before. They came hard and fast, walls of wind and mud and lightning. And if it caught us out here, I didn't want to think about that. I glanced at him again. The German shepherd puppy hadn't moved since I laid him down. His body, still wrapped in the flannel, looked too small for the seat. His muzzle twitched once, barely. His ears, those oversized puppy ears, were coated in dust. One of them folded down like it had given up. I reached for my radio. No response. I hit the gas. We needed the vet now. I drove with my hazard lights flashing, even though there wasn't a single car in sight. Just us, the empty desert, and a fight against the clock. I wasn't sure we were winning. 10 minutes in, he let out a noise. Not a bark, a ragged, choked hiccup of a sound, like his body trying to clear itself. I looked over, and his eyes were open. Not fully, just slits, but focused on me. "You're awake," I whispered, voice breaking. "You're really awake." His tail didn't wag. His paws didn't move. But he blinked, slow and deliberate. A breath escaped me that I didn't know I'd been holding. Another 30 meters. I pressed the accelerator harder. Up ahead, the sky cracked open, a jagged bolt of lightning cutting through the black clouds. Thunder rolled behind it, distant but growing. Wind buffeted the side of the truck, pushing sand across the road like smoke. I didn't care. I kept driving. And then just as I turned onto the final stretch of highway, I felt something warm, gentle against my arm. AZ had rested his head there. It wasn't strength. It wasn't trust. It was something deeper. It was surrender. The quiet kind. The kind where a soul that's nearly gone chooses to believe in someone else for just a little longer. I swallowed hard and whispered, "We're almost there, buddy. Just a little longer. Stay with me." The clinic sat like a mirage on the edge of town. Low stucco walls, faded blue sign, dust clinging to the windows. I skidded into the parking lot, gravel spraying, heart pounding like a war drum. I didn't even shut the door behind me. I scooped Ozzy into my arms and ran. The front desk nurse stood when she saw me, eyes going wide at the sight of the puppy. "No time," I gasped. "Sinkhole, heat stroke. He's barely hanging on." They moved fast. A tech rushed in with a gurney. I laid Ozzy down and the flannel fell open. The room fell silent for a second. His tiny chest fluttered. His lips were dry and cracked. He looked like he'd been lost for days in a place no living thing should survive. He's a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 4 months. Found him in the desert. No food, no water. I don't know how long he was down there. The vet, Dr. Hughes, appeared from the back, already snapping on gloves. He didn't ask questions, just went to work. "For now, get a fluids bag. We need to cool his core, but slow. He's in shock." I stepped back as they surrounded Ozzy, hooking him to machines, inserting the IV with delicate precision. He didn't even twitch, just breathed barely as they worked. I felt helpless, useless, like all I'd done was delay the inevitable. Dr. Hughes turned to me. "You pulled him out of a sinkhole?" I nodded. He shook his head slowly. "It's a miracle he's alive." Another hour, and he didn't finish the sentence. I dropped into the nearest chair covered in dust and sweat. My arms still trembled from the climb. My lungs burned from the drive. But none of it mattered. Ozzy was inside that room, and for the first time since I found him, he wasn't alone. An hour passed, then 2. A tech brought me water. I didn't drink it. I kept watching the door like a soldier waiting for news from the front line. At 3:12 p.m., it creaked open. Dr. Hughes stepped out, pulling his gloves off, and gave me a look I couldn't read. "He's stable. Barely, but he's a fighter." My throat tightened. "He's not out of the woods," the doctor said, "but he made it through the worst of the heat damage. Now it's up to him." I stood, legs aching. "Can I see him?" Dr. Hughes nodded. "But keep it quiet. He's not ready for movement." I stepped into the dim recovery room, and there he was, AZ, lying on a warming pad, IV taped to his leg, breathing shallow but steady. His ears still flopped to the side, dust clinging to his fur. And then, just as I knelt beside him, his eyes opened, and he looked right at me. It wasn't just a glance. It was the kind of look that breaks something open inside you. Ozzy's eyes were glazed, dull from dehydration, but they locked onto mine like he'd been waiting to see me again. Like he remembered the pit, the rope, the water on his tongue. Somehow in the haze of everything he'd survived, he still knew I was the one who'd pulled him from the dark. I leaned closer, careful not to disturb the tubes, and whispered, "You made it, little guy." His paw twitched. Not a spasm, not reflex. It reached barely and rested against the edge of the blanket. That was all, but it felt like a mile. A nurse entered quietly behind me and adjusted the fluids. She smiled when she saw the connection between us. "He's responding to your voice," she said softly. "That's a good sign." "He's got a name," I replied, surprising even myself. "AZ," she nodded. "Well, Ozzy's got a stubborn heart. That's clear. They let me stay by his side longer than protocol usually allows. I didn't ask for it, they just knew." I talked to him in low murmurs, told him everything I could think of about the desert, about how I found him, about my work with rescue patrols, about the coyote I didn't get to in time. I don't know why I told him that part. Maybe because I needed to say it. Maybe because I didn't want Ozzy to be another memory that ended in silence. His breathing steadied as I spoke. Not perfect, but stronger. By evening, the storm outside had broken. Rain tapped gently on the clinic windows, cooling the world that had tried to burn him alive just hours before. I watched the sky darken through the glass, one hand resting lightly beside his. When the vet came back in, he looked pleased. He's rehydrating well, still touch and go, but if he makes it through the night, his chances go way up. I nodded, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. So they gave me a folded blanket and a chair, and I stayed. Sat there for hours as the monitors beeped softly. Ozzy slept peacefully now. No more shallow gasps, just the slow rhythm of a puppy recovering from hell. Sometime past midnight, I dozed off in the chair, and when I woke sometime before dawn, Ozzy had shifted. He wasn't just breathing. He was curled toward me like he'd been trying to close the space between us. Morning light crept through the clinic blinds, painting thin golden stripes across the tiled floor. I sat up slowly, my back stiff, the wool blanket still draped over my shoulders. My first instinct was panic. Had he moved too much? Was he okay? But then I saw him. Ozzy was still curled on the warming pad, but his head was turned fully toward me now. One eye opened lazily, then the other. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. Awareness. I reached out, let my fingers brush gently behind his ear. He didn't pull away. "You held on," I whispered. "You really held on." A nurse stepped in, smiling. "We've been monitoring all night. His vitals are improving. He's still very weak, but this little guy is fighting harder than most grown dogs I've seen." She adjusted his IV and placed a small bowl of water nearby. He didn't move for it, but his eyes followed the sound. "Maybe later," I murmured, "one miracle at a time." Dr. Hughes entered next, flipping through a chart. "We'll try a bit of nutrient paste soon, something easy on the stomach. His body needs everything slow, controlled." I nodded, not taking my eyes off AZ. The vet paused. "You planning to stay?" I met his gaze. "If you'll let me," he smiled. "We've got a spare cot in the back. I think he'd want you close." That afternoon, I stood by as they disconnected the IV for a few minutes and offered AZ a tiny lick of glucose paste from a fingertip. He hesitated. His nose twitched. Then slowly his tongue moved. It was clumsy, weak, but it was deliberate. The room felt like it had taken a breath with him. "That's the moment," the vet whispered. "That's when you know they've decided to live." I looked down at the German Shepherd puppy, whose eyes were now more open than closed. Who had spent who knows how many hours buried in heat and silence and fear. And I realized something. This wasn't just recovery, it was resurrection. Later, I sat beside his cage as the sun began to set again, sky blazing orange through the window. I told him about my favorite dog growing up, a shepherd named Tank, who used to sleep on my feet under the dinner table. I hadn't talked about Tank in years. It hurt too much, but with AZ there, it didn't feel like pain. It felt like remembering how it felt to be whole. And then, just before the lights dimmed for the night, AZ shifted again, just enough to place one paw on the edge of his blanket, pushing it ever so slightly toward me. Not much, but enough to say, "I'm still here." By the third morning, Ozzy surprised everyone. I walked into the recovery room, balancing a paper cup of black coffee, expecting to find him curled up as usual. But instead, I found him sitting upright, wobbly, legs shaky, head too heavy for his neck, but sitting like a soldier trying to stand at roll call after battle. "Easy there, buddy," I said, nearly spilling my coffee as I rushed to his side. He turned his head toward me, slow but purposeful, and let out the faintest sound. Not a bark, not a whimper, just a breathy, raspy puff of air, like his vocal cords were testing the waters. The nurse entered just in time to witness it. "Well, look who's trying to run the place," she smiled. "He's got fire now." She brought a small bowl of soft food. AZ looked at it, confused at first, then glanced at me. "Go ahead," I whispered. "It's for you." He didn't lunge, didn't devour it, but he leaned forward, tongue flicking out, taking a taste, then another slow, determined bites. Watching him eat was like watching the sun rise, proof that darkness doesn't last forever. The vet examined him later that day. His heart was stronger, temperature normal, rehydrated, still fragile, but out of critical danger. Dr. Hughes called it a turnaround we don't often get. I stayed with Ozzy every minute I could. I learned the rhythm of his breath, the tilt of his ears when he was listening, the twitch in his tail when he dreamed. He was recovering not just physically, he was learning to trust, and so was I. One afternoon, I brought in an old tennis ball from my truck. I didn't expect much, just something familiar in the room. I set it down near his bed and took a seat. 15 minutes later, I looked up and froze. AZ had stretched out a paw. It rested gently against the ball. He wasn't playing. He was claiming it. That night, I was lying on the cot beside his kennel. Lights dimmed, machines humming their soft lullabies. I thought he was asleep until I felt something brush my arm through the cage bars. It was his nose. He had inched himself to the edge, pressing as close to me as he could. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just lay there feeling the soft, warm breath of a German Shepherd puppy who refused to be forgotten and who day by day was teaching me what resilience truly looked like. By the end of the week, AZ was walking, not well, not far, but enough. It started with a hesitant rise, back legs unsure, front paws braced against the slippery clinic floor. I watched from the cot, heart in my throat, ready to spring forward if he collapsed. But he didn't. He stood, and when the nurse opened the kennel door to refresh his bedding, Ozzy didn't wait. He stepped out, slow, clumsy, deliberate, one paw, then another. The entire room froze, watching this fragile creature who days ago was more shadow than animal take his first real steps back into the world. The nurse knelt beside him, tears brimming. "Look at you, little man." He didn't acknowledge her. His eyes were locked on me. I dropped to my knees, arms open. "Come on, Ozzy. You got this." He limped forward, head down, ears flopping with each shaky step. 4 feet, then 5, then 6. By the time he reached me, I couldn't hold it back. I scooped him gently into my arms, buried my face in his dusty fur, and just breathed. The clinic staff clapped. AZ didn't understand the celebration. He only knew one thing. He wasn't alone anymore. From that point on, progress came fast. His appetite returned in full. He started reacting to sounds, perking up at voices, shifting toward warmth. I brought in a second blanket, a blue one, and he claimed it like it was gold. We took our first walk outside 2 days later. I carried him out back to a quiet, grassy patch behind the clinic. Set him down slowly. The sun hit his fur, golden and soft, and for a moment he just stood there blinking. Then he sniffed the air, the wind, the grass, the faint scent of rain still lingering from the storm that nearly stole him. He took a step, then another. He didn't try to run, didn't need to. Just being on his feet outside under the sky, it was enough. I sat nearby watching him, and I felt something shift inside me. Not guilt, not grief, but something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And then, as if to prove he was still full of surprises, Ozzy looked back at me and wagged his tail. The knock came just after noon. I was sitting beside Ozzy's kennel, feeding him bits of boiled chicken while he chewed with puppy-like intensity, messy, uncoordinated, and full of purpose. The door creaked open, and Dr. Hughes stepped in with someone behind him. Animal control, not the usual uniformed officer. This was someone higher up. A tall woman in plain clothes, badge clipped to her belt, clipboard in hand. "Zousier's the one from the sinkhole?" she asked, voice calm, but clipped. I nodded, instantly on guard. "We've received a report," she continued, "that a dog matching his description was dumped illegally. The caller didn't leave a name, but they gave coordinates. The exact spot where you found him." My heart stopped. She crouched beside Azzy's pen, studying his body, the ribs still visible, the healing abrasions on his paw pads, the stiffness in his gait. No microchip, no tags, but those injuries, that location. This wasn't a stray who wandered. Someone left him there. Ozzy lowered his head when she spoke, shrinking slightly into his blanket. He remembered. I clenched my fists. "Are you going after them?" "We'll try. Desert cases are tough. No cameras, no witnesses. But we have a starting point now." She stood, her voice softening. "He's lucky you were out there." I looked down at him. German Shepherd puppy, barely over 4 months, scarred by sun and silence, and someone's neglect. And for the first time, I realized just how close he came to never being found. She handed me a card. "If he stays in your care, we'll need follow-up paperwork." "He's not going anywhere," I said before she finished. AZ looked up. That afternoon, we took another walk, this time longer. His steps were more sure, his tail not just wagging, but held a little higher. Each breeze brought him something new. A bird call, the scent of blooming creosote, the distant bark of another dog. He didn't flinch anymore. When we sat beneath the mosque tree, he laid beside me, not touching, just near, present, and then a sound, distant, harsh, a car door slamming out on the road. AZ froze, his whole body stiffened, ears pinned back. He wasn't ready, not yet. I gently reached over, placed my hand on his back. "I got you," I whispered, No one's ever leaving you behind again. He stayed frozen a moment longer. Then slowly, his muscles eased. He turned toward me and rested his head in my lap. AZ came home on a Thursday, not to a kennel, not to a temporary foster. Home. He sat in the passenger seat of my truck, wrapped in that same blue blanket from the clinic. His head barely reached the window, ears twitching at every passing noise. But he didn't tremble. He didn't flinch. He just watched, curious, alive. The sun poured through the windshield, catching the gold in his fur. We pulled into my driveway just before sunset. The house was quiet, modest, nothing fancy, but it had something he hadn't felt in weeks. Safety. I opened the door. He didn't rush out. He waited for me. I lifted him gently and carried him inside, set him down on the cool tile. His nose twitched. He took one step, then another. He explored every room, the living room, the kitchen, the spare bedroom, then back to the living room. His eyes landed on the dog bed by the couch. Tank's old spot, still there after all these years. I never could bring myself to move it. Ozzy walked straight to it, sniffed it once, then curled up like it had always been his. I sat across from him, stunned. It wasn't just comfort, it was claiming. He'd chosen it. He'd chosen me. Later that night, I opened the sliding door and let him step outside. The air was cool, the stars stretching overhead like stories waiting to be told. He patted onto the grass, stiff legs still clumsy, and looked up at the sky. I don't know what he was thinking in that moment, but I know what I felt. Peace. A kind of peace I hadn't known since Tank passed. Not just because I'd saved a life, but because AZ had let me in. He wasn't just healing, he was rebuilding something in both of us. Inside, I laid a new bowl beside the old water dish. Above it, I pinned a photo, a simple one. Ozzy on day 4 of recovery, his tongue out, eyes still tired, but smiling. And below it, I wrote, "Welcome home, Ozzy." That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a quiet weight at the foot of the bed. Pause, then warmth. Ozzy didn't curl beside me. He curled on me, head on my leg, breath slow and steady. He was home, and somehow so was I. They left him in a hole to die. No food, no water, no shade, just the silence of the desert and the slow ticking of time. Whoever did it thought the world would forget him, that no one would ever hear his cries, that a 4-month-old German Shepherd puppy, weak and voiceless, would disappear without a sound. But AZ didn't disappear. He fought through heat, through thirst, through fear, through days buried in dust and nights colder than stone. He fought when there was no reason to, when no one was coming, when the sun was his only witness, and somehow he survived. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are, because it wasn't just me who saved him. It was the vet who opened his clinic after hours, the nurse who sat up through the night, the donors who paid for fluids and medicine, the strangers who shared his photo before we even knew his name. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. AZ reminded me that healing doesn't come in a straight line. It limps, it stumbles, it hides in corners before it's brave enough to step back into the light. But when it does, it shines. If you've ever looked away from a hurting animal thinking someone else would help, don't. Be the someone. Because one act of kindness doesn't just save a life, it rebuilds one. So if Ozzy's story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Somewhere out there, another dog is waiting. In a ditch, in a cage, in silence. Let this story be the reason they get found. Let Ozzy's fight inspire yours. Don't forget to subscribe.